Now, like many people over summer, I spent a bit of time doing a road trip. I love a road trip around Australia. If there's one thing that became abundantly clear, it's that Australia is not ready for electric vehicles. Now, I wasn't alone. There were plenty of people taking to social media, have a look at this, to show the long queues of people waiting to recharge their vehicles in places like Albury, Donga, Coffs Harbour. So if electric vehicles are our future, as the Greens, the Greenies and various state governments and even Chris Bowen in Canberra want us to believe, I still have serious doubts. Would you really want to be sitting in a queue like that? Joining me now is the Daily Telegraph cartoonist. I would call him Australia's best cartoonist, but Mark Knight, who draws a cartoon on my column in the Herald Sun every Saturday, might get a bit upset about that. He's a motoring enthusiast. He's had his own issues with electric cars. Warren Brown, can you believe those pictures we saw?
Oh, look, it doesn't surprise me, Steve, at all. And, you know, we're seeing pictures like this from all over the world. In the United States, there have been some YouTube clips of columns of electric cars just banked up and banked up and banked up. And, there's a car driving past, filming these scores of cars just waiting to get plugged in. And, of course, once they're plugged in, it'll take anywhere between 35, 45 minutes to an hour, perhaps. So that's what will happen. And I mean, I've discovered in my travels, I'm not an electric car guy, but I went out into Western New South Wales with someone who had an electric car, and we discovered that once you sort of get off the Hume Highway, you're sort of okay on the Hume Highway because there are big towns along the way. You can sort of leapfrog from one to another, but at every time you get to one, you get to charge up. Once you get off to that, into a rural town, they may have one charger. And if that charger is broken, if it's out of order, I don't know what you're going to do.
I've talked to a lot of car reviewers who say that is a huge issue, that you turn up there and there might be a charger, as you say, but it's broken. I did the south coast of New South Wales into Victoria in December. I looked up, I haven't got an electric car, I wouldn't touch one, but there was one charger in Narooma, and then you go further south. I mean, anywhere, below Eden, into East Gippsland, there's no way you're going to get an electric car charger. So, we are being conned in a sense. And I don't know about you, Warren, but I am increasingly seeing more and more and more electric cars on the road, but we don't have the infrastructure.
No, they're selling their socks off. That's right. But as you say, we don't have the infrastructure, and we see, Chris Bowen come out. And if you have the argument about what's happening with electric cars, he sort of looks at you like you're some kind of drongo. Like, what would you know? This is the kind of attitude that the government is sort of sending out to people who question it. There are various things with electric cars they don't tell you. And I only heard last week that South Korea took Tesla to court and fined them for not advertising properly. There are things that you don't know about electric cars. One is that electric cars don't like long-distance, high-speed driving, and they don't like driving in the cold. You know how many you start your car and on a cold day and the battery just goes, well, an electric car is like that. Now, in Australia, we have big distances, huge distances to cover, and electric cars don't like that. They're okay in the city, and if you're driving at night in the outback somewhere, or anywhere in the bush, the car doesn't like that either. So it rips through the charge. Where are you going to charge the thing up?
The other thing that we've all been led to believe is that you could somehow turn up at one of these charging stations, Warren, and it's free. You just plug the car in and charge it up. That's not true. You actually have to pay for the electricity to charge your car, whether it's at home or whether it's on the road. There's three different types of charging devices, very quick to very slow. I mean, I can't, Warren, I hate being in a petrol station for longer than 5 minutes. How would you like to be standing in a line for 2 hours to charge your car?
Well, that's right. And the other thing about that is, in these country towns, I discovered with my friend who had the Tesla went in, I'd driven them before and they've got blistering performance, but we charged up at Gundagai, and then there were two other electric cars there. And when everybody was sort of charged up, they're all ripping their cords out and things. And my friend says to me, keep an eye on where they go. And I said, why? He said, because if they get to the next town first and there's only one charger, we'll have to wait. So there's this kind of Hunger Games mentality of trying to get in front of everybody else so that you can, it was quite, nerve-wracking to try and get the car charged up again. But this is what we're looking at, and this is what we're not being told. And, this is all very well in a small country. And I always wheel out, Scandinavian countries like Norway. Norway's got so many electric cars, but it's wonderful. Now, the width of Norway at its widest part is roughly Sydney to Dubbo. The width of Australia is, from one coast to another, is London to Moscow, which is quite extraordinary. So, these are the things we're being told. I live in the bush. I live on a property, and coincidentally, one of my neighbours has a Tesla, and he actually bought the first Tesla in Australia, and he still has it, but he's an off-the-grid kind of guy. Now, he wants to charge it by his solar panels. And I said to him, how long does this take, Jeff, to charge it up with solar? 2.5 days to charge it on his property. Days. With solar on his property. He's an off-the-grid guy. I'm going, you're kidding me. He says, oh, no, but I try and get into Goulburn to charge it up with one of the stations there. But if I charge it at home on the solar power, 2.5 days.
You draw cartoons for a living for average Australians. You've got a real feel for the Australian public. Yeah. What's your feeling about whether they are going to embrace these vehicles or not? I know the price entry point has been the problem at the moment so far, but they will get cheaper. But do you think outside of, the trendy inner suburbs of Melbourne and Sydney and Brisbane and certainly Canberra, that people will really take to these things or not?
Look, they work well in the city because they actually, as I said, they don't like long-distance, high-speed motoring, but they work well with stop-start, which is just the opposite of an internal combustion engine. So they actually kind of work quite well in the city. But, where are you going to plug this thing in at home? If you're living in a, terrace house in Surrey Hills or somewhere or other, or, Fitzroy, or wherever you are, where are you going to plug the damn thing in? And I think certainly in rural and regional Australia, this not thought out at all, and it will damage tourism. So I've been out in Western New South Wales covering stories for the Daily Telegraph on the Darling River. Now, once you get out there, there's nothing. So tourism in these places will just vanish because no one will be game enough to try and take an electric vehicle out there. We went out there with a four-wheel drive Prado and discovered the place was in flood, and then had to have a 270-kilometre detour to get round to this place called Tilpa. Now, you couldn't do that in an electric car. So, and once it sort of runs out of juice, it goes into limp mode for a bit, and then once it runs out of limp mode, I hope your mobile phone has a charge because it's a tilt tray to get you wherever you need to go from there.